Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience while we work through some technical gremlins. It's perhaps timely, given the technical nature of our guest this evening. This is episode 2 of Cleared for Takeoff. And in this series, we explore arbitration careers across Asia Pacific. This second edition is a technical stopover on our journey, and technical domains in arbitration are unlocked by experts and consultants. So these forensic accountants, delay analysts, technical specialists, and other professionals, they serve an essential purpose, and that is applying specialized knowledge beyond the law to the resolution of disputes. For those lawyers who are attending, it's sometimes easy to forget that it's not only lawyers that are critical to the process, and these are the people we're speaking with tonight. So to start with, I'll ask our speakers to introduce themselves. So just passing to the speakers, perhaps I'll start with Chaitanya, if I can ask you to begin.
Certainly. Thanks, Christian. Hello, everybody. My name is Chaitanya Arora. I'm a managing director with a firm called Secretariat. Some of you may have heard of it. My focus is to be an expert witness in disputes on the specific topic of damages and valuation. So I am the numbers guy. I speak to financial issues and disputes. I have a background of being a chartered accountant and training in finance, but I didn't start my career as an expert witness. I've had a journey which is quite different from many others. Started off as a financial auditor, checking boxes and ticking some numbers off, to move on to becoming an advisor on M&A projects, so mergers and acquisitions, iBanking, etc. And through some course of destiny, I ended up becoming an expert witness, which I thought was going to be a one-time deal, but 16 years later, I still seem to be enjoying it.
Great, thank you, Chaitanya. Next, perhaps to Victor.
Thanks, Christian. Hi, all, pleasure to be here. My name is Victor. I'm a managing director with a firm called HKA. I'm based in Perth, Australia. I provide expert witness services in topics of quantum and delay. And I started my career very briefly as a clerk for a barrister. I studied law and engineering at university, and then very briefly as a project engineer. But very quickly, my career took me to claims and assisting clients with claims. And that's what I've been doing for just over a decade now.
Great, thank you, Victor. Next, we'll move on to Lydia.
Thanks, Christian, and thank you all of you for joining this webinar. I'm Lydia Tang, a director with BRG in Hong Kong. I focus on forensic accounting, valuation and damages, and fraud investigation in the context of arbitration and litigation. Similar to Chaitanya, I study accounting and finance and began my career as an auditor. I think looking back, it was invaluable because it taught me how to analyze the company's financial position and identify accounting issues and fraud from the underlying records and evidence. I then spent several years working in finance and compliance departments of international financial institutions. That gave me an insider's perspective on how financial institutions operate, which has been particularly useful because many disputes in Hong Kong involve banks, financial services, and other regulatory entities. And then quite a number of years ago, then I joined BRG and moved into this expert witness world. And today I advise on arbitrations, litigation, and investigation across different jurisdictions.
Thank you. And last, but by no means at all least, Karen. Karen, who looks suspiciously still in her video right now. Are you there, Karen?
I seem to be having a little technical problem at my end.
It seems to be coming through fine now, Karen, if you'd like to continue.
I'm sorry, I've just lost all sound.
No problem at all. Look, I'll introduce myself. I'm Christian Maley. I'm a independent counsel and arbitrator based in Perth. My practice spans Australia and Singapore, and from there across the Asia Pacific region. And it's my pleasure to be welcoming this group of experts tonight. I also would like to introduce Vivien Wong, who, if she's ready, will be taking over for the rest of this session as moderator. So Vivien, if you're ready, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about the technical issues just faced. Can everyone hear me?
We can, yes. We've just gotten through the introductions, save for Karen, who will do so when she's stabilized her connection.
Okay. So then I'll proceed with the first part of our seminar first. So we have a great mix of backgrounds today. So we have experts from business advisory, forensic accounting, construction and engineering. They're very different disciplines, obviously, but they all have a career and as an expert in arbitration. So let's just start off by understanding the landscape that experts operate in. So let's start with the big picture. So in terms of arbitration work, how is the expert and consultancy sector structured in your jurisdiction? And what type of practices do experts and consultants work within? Lydia, perhaps I could invite you to give us your perspective on how the sector is organized in your jurisdiction.
Sure, thanks, Vivien. So from a Hong Kong perspective, I think the expert market is quite diverse. Experts may work in specialist dispute consultancies, accounting firms, valuation boutiques, or even like other industry-specific advisory practices. At my own firm, BRG, we cover both like contentious and non-contentious work, which is similar to many other consultancy. And we have different practices like valuation, damages, forensic accounting, data analytics, construction, healthcare, etc. So that allows us to support complex cross-border disputes within multidisciplinary teams. And in my own practice, a significant proportion of our instructions arise from shareholder and joint venture disputes, post M&A disputes, breach of contract claims, investigations, and regulatory matters. And given Hong Kong's position as an international financial center, we also frequently work on disputes involving financial institutions, investment structures, and also other regulatory businesses. Also, I think if disputes in Hong Kong are becoming increasingly cross-border, it's actually very common for a dispute to involve business, assets, management teams, and financial records that spanning multiple jurisdictions, which means that as experts ourselves, we often work with councils or tribunals from different legal and cultural backgrounds.
I see. Victor, how does this compare with the position in Australia? Are there any notable differences in how experts are organized there?
No, I wouldn't say there's an appreciable difference in how we're organised here. My firm similarly spans the various service areas. We work cross-border quite frequently. My team itself spans the Asia Pacific region. So no, I think very similar here in Australia.
I see. How about you for Chaitanya? How does it work in Singapore?
I think experts are not entirely organized. I think they are quite unorganized. They are, as they say, the world is our oyster, and that's quite true to our profession because unlike the profession of law, which has jurisdictional restrictions, I mean, experts in their domain can be easily transferable to different jurisdictions in different situations. So I think one of the advantages, I would think, is the ability to work in different parts of the world, especially under the similar legal system. So if you are sort of working in a common law environment, then it's quite common to see people operating in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Dubai, in London, quite seamlessly. So I think that's one of the big hallmarks and advantages of being in a profession not constrained by jurisdictional restrictions.
Thank you, Chaitanya. Lydia, you mentioned that your practice is very international. So how often do you work with experts in other jurisdictions, and how regularly are you instructed in matters outside of Hong Kong?
Yeah, so for us, I think it's very common for our practice to work with people, tribunals, lawyers, and experts from different jurisdictions to work on the same matter, because generally speaking, a dispute which stated in Hong Kong can involve a Cayman holding companies, operations in mainland China, and an investor from US, from Europe. So in those situations, I think the expertise is more assembled around the issues itself rather than the geography alone. Personally, many of my matters are kind of outside Hong Kong. So I work in also like Singapore arbitration, Chinese arbitration, and also even kind of like Cayman court cases as well. The core principles underlying valuation damages and forensic accounting are generally transferable across jurisdictions, which allow us to work internationally. But I think having that said, local knowledge sometimes can be quite important as well, because in Hong Kong in particular, many arbitrations involve Chinese entities or business with significant operations in China. So as a result, it is often quite critical to understand the business environment in China and also the wider region, including like market practice, commercial realities, and how business actually operates.
Mm-hmm. So apart from arbitration work, are you engaged in other sorts of, like, for example, pre-arbitration work or other kinds of, you mentioned court proceedings as well. So any types of probably like contractual claims processes?
Yes, so I think nowadays it is more common for our clients to instruct us before the arbitration or litigation actually start, because they want to know, like, for example, if there is actually a potential claim from the claimant side. So they sometimes we will also work with the litigation funders as well to make a preliminary assessment even before the arbitration starts. So I would say those sort of like pre-arbitration or pre-litigation procedures become more increasingly common now.
That's very helpful, Lydia. Victor, how about for the construction and engineering sector? So are you often engaged in pre-arbitration work or other, like, probably adjudication?
Yeah, so really I get engaged, spanning the project lifecycle. So it could be as early as the pre-commencement of the project, where I'm assisting clients with setting up their processes for dealing with claims and disputes well before they actually arise. That then leads into the delivery stage, where sometimes I'm engaged as to assist in the preparation of claims, so not as an independent party, but more frequently, and this is what we recommend to clients, they do engage independent experts pre-dispute to give them some prospects advice as to the material they have before them, or to give some prospects advice in relation to claims that they may have themselves received. And that flows then all the way through to adjudication, arbitration, litigation, expert determination, and dispute boards, whatever the forum might be. They certainly all have their peculiarities procedurally. Typically, it's the lawyers that are bearing the brunt of that. For my work, the principles, as Lydia said, in relation to her discipline, don't really change based on the forum you're in. So while procedurally there may be differences, for me, it's really quite similar work.
That's very helpful, Victor. So definitely experts are clearly involved in many stages of dispute resolution process, rather than when the matter goes into litigation or arbitration. So with that depth of experience, I would like to explore whether experts can make the transition from assisting the tribunal or the court to sitting as a decision maker. So Victor, is it common for experts or consultants with your background to go into serving as an arbitrator or adjudicator?
Locally, less and less over time. So there was a time where it wasn't uncommon, particularly for an adjudicator, to be someone with a technical or project management background, and that became less common as a member of a tribunal. Now I would say typically in arbitrations that have an Australian connection or are run out of an Australian institution, primarily the tribunal members will be either counsel or people that have formerly served as judges. So it's becoming more and more rare. And on the adjudicator side and expert determination side, a similar thing is occurring, where the number of technical experts appointed to those roles seems to be reducing.
I see. Chaitanya, how about for your practice? Is it common for people with your background to want to be the decision maker in arbitrations or adjudication?
I'd say it should be common, but it's not. I think there is a tendency among parties, and for good reason, to focus on legally trained professionals to take the role of arbitrators. Right? It's I would say highly uncommon to find an individual with a different background than law to sit as an arbitrator in the cases that at least I've been involved in, and that's a significant number in itself. But I think that is a major shortcoming of the process, right? And I speak with all due respect to lawyers who are obviously imperative to this process of dispute resolution. However, sometimes we tend to forget that the parties involved in dispute resolution aren't fighting about the law. They're actually fighting about money. And that sort of is the last topic that gets discussed in an arbitral proceeding on the final day of the hearing in the last hour, when damages experts get the opportunity to express their opinions on the most important topic, which is how much money should satisfy the issue that is being arbitrated. So I think in an ideal situation, a lot more arbitrators should have a financial background, but in reality, that's not the case.
So are you seeing like young professionals, they have dual education background? For example, they are both doing accounting and law probably to enter your practice?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But I don't think that's going to be entirely the case in the future. I think with folks, our profession, the professional expert witnesses is not that old in my experience. I mean, many people coming out of universities don't even know that this option exists, and it only exists after a certain amount of experience is gained, right? So I don't think people start off their professional journey thinking, I do want to be an expert witness at some point in time. But as this role becomes more and more common and accepted, I think more people will look to this option of being dual qualified.
I see. Thank you. That's a very candid and helpful perspective. So it seems that while there is maybe a pathway from expert work into arbitration or other decision-making roles, it is not necessarily very straightforward or a natural transition for people in the industry. So I think Karen is back with us. Karen, can you hear?
Yes, hi, Vivien.
Hello, Karen. We're back to you. So for the next part, would you kindly walk us through the work of an expert in arbitration? So what does a typical engagement look like from the initial instruction by the client through to the conclusion of the arbitration?
That's changed over time, and quite often it changes from arbitration to arbitration. The first part is getting appointed, and at the beginning of my career, most of my appointments came through lawyers. However, over time, that has changed. You've worked with clients before, they may have another issue, they like you, you're a trusted pair of hands, they would like you back. So I would say these days appointments are probably, say, 70-30, 70% coming from lawyers, 30% coming from the clients themselves. 5 or 10 years ago, particularly if I was being appointed by the respondent, my appointment might come very late in the proceedings themselves. So that is once evidence in chief and expert evidence has been submitted already, and then you might get appointed. These days, it's increasingly common for experts to be appointed at the outset and to be a part of the process of how the arbitration is going to proceed. And quite often these days, we're consulted on how we're to be instructed, what our instructions might be, what documents or type of documents we're going to, or we would like to rely on, what the issues are our methodologies and the like. And we really are increasingly a big part of that procedural process. It's now relatively common. In fact, my last couple of arbitrations have been that rather than adopting, the traditional pleading style approach where, the claimant puts on its evidence and then there's evidence in reply, is that the experts will be directed to produce a single joint report, which identifies what the issues are, what we can agree on, what we're unable to reach agreement on, which will form the basis of our cross-examination. And having done both approaches, one, that more traditional pleadings approach, and now the more collaborative approach, working very closely with the instructing lawyers, with counsel, with the tribunal themselves, with the opposing expert, I must say I much prefer that more collaborative approach to identifying what the issues are and what the answer to those things are. I think it's very efficient. I think it's very productive. I think it reduces an enormous amount of waste, both in terms of time and money. And I think it also maximises the benefit of specialist technical opinion evidence, both for the parties and the tribunal. And Doug Jones, who I'm sure is well known to everybody on the call, has written an absolutely fantastic paper on this approach, which he adopted for a very technically complex case involving a nuclear power station a few years ago. So I would highly recommend that everybody on the call, if you can find a copy of the paper, to read it. But that is how arbitrations, particularly in construction and particularly here in the Middle East, are proceeding, which is more of a collaborative approach to understanding what the issues are and what the answer is, rather than the more contentious, combative approach of yesteryear.
Thank you, Karen. That's very interesting because the lawyer is working very closely with the expert, as you've described. Just one question: because the expert is supposed to be independent in arbitration, so how does that work? How do you separate that element of independence when you're also being like a consultant to one of the parties, right?
I haven't really experienced any difference to it. We're part of the process. Independence is in how you conduct yourself. And during the analysis period, the only real difference is that you're working both independently and in concert with the expert from the other side to continue to agree what information is relevant to the issue, how you're going to interpret that issue, how you're going to apply the methodology to it. Maybe I've been very fortunate in the opposing experts that I've worked with, that they've had similar approaches to their work. And I think when you've been a part of the process of deciding what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, the parties, if they disagree with it, do have the opportunity to raise their concerns about things as you go through the process. But I actually think it has its benefits in which it kind of does keep you both honest, because you are producing that single joint report. There's no opportunities really for concessions later on. You really do have to believe in what you're putting forward.
Sure. So we've heard Karen's perspective from her work as a construction and engineering expert. So I wonder whether there's any difference from our two experts from a business advisory and forensic accounting. So probably Lydia, what's your experience in the actual arbitration process as being an expert?
Yeah, I think my observations are quite similar to what Karen has. I think nowadays experts get involved earlier in the process, which from our perspective is definitely helpful. Because historically speaking, we generally come quite late in the process, just like Chaitanya said, usually the quantum part is the kind of last bit of the whole legal proceedings. And then we just get involved when like the judge or the tribunal order that, oh, you need to get a quantum expert to determine what are the damages that like the claimant suffer. And then, but then there are actually documents that we would actually want to obtain to support our either valuation or accounting issues. So for example, like if there is any management forecast, any budget that is prepared at the time, but then if we were actually coming late, we lose the chance to request for that. So nowadays, given that I think generally speaking, lawyers are trying to get us involved earlier so that we are involved in also the document request process in exchanging reference schedules, that sort of things. So that is extremely helpful that we can tell the lawyers, okay, this is the list of documents that we would expect to have if we need to do this sort of like evaluation or quantum exercise, and we would need you to fit it into the information request list to the other side. So that has been quite helpful. And in terms of also the kind of instructions, I think it is also the same as in initially most of the instructions come from lawyers because generally we kind of interact with like all the law firms in Hong Kong or overseas. But then I think after a few things, sometimes because PE funds generally have a lot of different investments, for example, across the world. And then we help them on the first one that they have dispute on. Afterwards, they tend to kind of also reach out to us to if there is further disputes coming up from their other portfolio for investment. So that is quite helpful that we get like instruction from both like law firms and also sometimes the end clients as well.
I see. So we've just looked into the experts work in an arbitration and more from a lens of lead expert. So let's now look at the people who support that kind of work. For many aspiring experts, their first experience of arbitration will be as a junior member of a team, so assisting with the analysis that supports the lead expert's opinion. So for the next part, Chaitanya, you've obviously worked with many junior colleagues over the course of your career. Could you give us a sense of what the day-to-day work looks like for a junior associate or a junior analyst in your field?
So in the spirit of full disclosure, I kind of skipped the part of being a junior analyst entirely in my journey as an expert witness, right? So which is something I do sometimes miss. But I would hope that for the team that I work with, day to day would not be the same as yesterday because it kind of changes from every day. Because while a lot of the work might involve a similar nature of analysis and a fair number of tasks that would be considered repetitive, but each case being different and each case having certain nuances requires a bespoke approach to being put together for addressing the question that is put to the expert. So I think I'm quite confident if you ask my team, they'd say each day looks different from the last one because you're dealing with different challenges, you're dealing with different problems, different kind of cases. One of the advantages I would think of being in a profession like ours is the variety of work that we get exposed to. I mean, someday we are assisting a matter involving a matrimonial dispute. The very next day, you could be working with a private equity fund looking at a post-M&A dispute. On another day, you could be, I am currently dealing with the situation where a mother is suing a son, something I never thought I would like to see. But, there's a fair amount of variety in the work we do. And each case having its nuances requires an out-of-box thinking. And for the juniors, that's the engaging part. They are the ones who are the bedrock of the work that I do. And then I would safely assume most experts do. And without the assistance of the team members, I think would be pretty useless in most cases.
So usually, how big is the team that works on probably one arbitration matter? So in your field,
I think it just depends on the complexity of the matter. But typical size of team would be no more than 2 or 3 people. Right? You have nowadays a fair number of tools that assist in, let's say, the heavy lifting, which previously and not that long ago used to be done manually or through traditional approaches to analyzing work. With the assistance that we get from AI and other tools, teams have become smaller and more experienced but sharper. So with a team size of 2 to 3, you can handle a large dispute end to end. That's not to say that we never need more than 2 to 3 people on a case. Sometimes you need to have a larger team to address multiple work streams that are concurrently progressed to meet different deadlines. So I think it just depends on the nature of the engagement.
I see. So for the most junior members of a team, usually what types of or what levels of work you would delegate to them?
So that level is changing. It's changing very rapidly as we see more and more assistance with the tools we have at our disposal, right? So the days where the junior most team member was, in charge of, copying files and making nicely and organized binders for team members are gone. I mean, all of that is now a thing in the past. Team members get exposed to a much higher complexity of work at the onset. You have the ability to look at large volumes of data and sort of work with the vast amounts of data that sometimes is involved in the analysis we conduct to not only prepare analysis, but also work with the more experienced team members to interpret the data and reach conclusions on their own. So I think that typical scope of work or the job description of the junior most team member has gone up a few notches from what it used to be just a few years ago. And the expectation from the less junior people, of the junior people, have also changed. I mean, I do expect my junior most team member now to be able to deliver a lot more work and work that is a lot more intellectually challenging than it used to be before, just because there is efficiency built into the tools we use these days to deliver our work.
I see. So usually, how does a junior, more junior member in a team do the transition to a senior role, or eventually like being a lead expert himself?
So I think I should start by saying not everybody gets to being a lead expert. And to be fair, not everybody wants to be a lead expert and not everybody needs to be a lead expert. There are professions within the larger profession which are quite long-term and focused on being assistive and not necessarily taking the role of the lead expert. But for those who want to take that role and would question why, but for them, there is clearly a path that is defined. I mean, you assist a lead expert in handling cases of increasing complexity. You take a larger sort of chunk of the overall work scope, and over time, you get exposure, experience, and training in looking at different situations from the lens of an expert witness, trying to sort of balance the complexities of a legal system with the experience and talent that you bring to the situation, and providing solutions. And that's what people in my discipline are trying to do. They're trying to assist the tribunal with solutions that are sensible, acceptable, and reasonable. And those 3 different attributes aren't something that can be handed over to a person on a platter, right? It's earned over time with experience. It's earned over time with just doing more and more cases. It's also important for the lead expert to be an enabler. Right? That's, I think, a very big part of the role we have, to be a steward in our profession, to be able to offer that position, that opportunity to the team members who are up and coming in the role of the lead expert. So not every client is being prepared to say, I'm ready and willing to bet the company kind of case in the hands of a very junior team member who's never testified before. But in the course of a year or of a professional's journey, those opportunities do come up. And it's for the more experienced team members to then offer them to the team members who are interested in taking the role of a lead expert.
Thank you, Chaitanya. Victor, how about in your field? So does it work differently? So you work with a big team as well, usually?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. I think for most matters, I would agree that a team of 2 or 3 assistants is plenty. Sometimes there's lots of unexciting work that needs to be done, so you might temporarily have more people on a particular matter. I broadly agree with the type of work that a junior team member does has changed. I will say that in my experience, it's been true for a long time now that simple bundling of documents or summarising type work hasn't really been a value add, even prior to the proliferation of language models. But I think one thing that I really agree that Chaitanya said was it's important to work, if you're a junior member, it's important for your own development to work with an expert that will help you develop. A large part of the work's quite creative. A lot of the time, I'm sure the other panelists would agree, we're dealing with ambiguities, we're dealing with gaps in information. That's really where the expertise comes in. That's where the interesting work comes in. As a delay expert, if someone's maintained perfect records and a perfect program, there's very little for me to do. Thankfully for my income, that's really the case. But I think that's really where the rubber hits the road. And I think as a junior team member, I encourage people to try to come up with solutions, to try to think about problems, to come with me with ideas, even if ultimately they don't form part of the finished product, or I don't agree with them for whatever reason. I think it's really important for their development that they do that, because that's really where the experience gets built.
I see. How about you, Lydia? Do you have anything to share from your perspective, working with junior?
Yeah. I think everything that Victor and Chaitanya says is like I agree with all of them. I think for a junior expert, I think it is actually quite important to give them the chance to attend the discussions with counsel or expert meetings or hearing prep sections, so that they can see how their work are used, which can help them to develop their judgment much faster. Because I think in a way that sometimes, when we are all very busy, then sometimes we just tell certain juniors that, oh, can you help me to check this appendix, blah, blah, blah. And then they don't really know where that work actually flows up to the final product. By giving them chances to know actually what are the kind of key things that we discuss with the client, and also the discussions, it actually helps them quite a lot to develop their own thinking as well.
So these are really practical insights, so thank you. So for the next step, I would like to discuss about actually if a young professional would like to broaden its practice into other jurisdictions. So Lydia, if you are advising an aspiring expert in your discipline, what sort of education background, professional qualification, or practical experience are most relevant or widely recognized in your jurisdiction or in your field?
Right. I don't think there is any kind of single prescribed route to become an expert witness in forensic accounting or valuation. To be honest, when I actually studying in university, I don't really know what exactly that is expert witness. And I'm pretty sure that applies to most of the people who are still studying. Most of us actually enter the profession through backgrounds in like accounting, finance, economics, or valuation. So quite a number of us have professional qualifications such as CPA or CFA, which can provide us a strong technical foundation and help us to establish the credibility in the market. But I think the qualifications are just actually a starting point. So in my view, what distinguishes a respected expert is the practical experience and judgment developed over time. I think for forensic accounting experts, quite a lot of us actually work in audit or investigation or financial reporting. That is very helpful, as in it develops the ability to analyze financial records and understand how business operate. And for valuation expert, quite a lot of us comes from transaction advisory, corporate finance, investment analysis, because they do a lot of like valuation work in their normal life. And so that can provide important insight into how business are valued and how commercial decisions are made in practice.
So that is very helpful, Lydia. Karen, could you kindly give us the construction and engineering perspective? So what kind of academic, professional experience you would recommend young professionals to obtain early on in their career?
Okay, once again, this has changed a lot over the last 10 years. And when I first started out in this area, most of the delay experts that I was working with were civil engineers or architects, or they'd often started off as a building cadet with a head contractor. But what they all had in common was that they had spent somewhere between 10 or 15 years in project delivery or as a consulting design engineer. So they had that grounding of having been in industry, having been a part of the project life cycle and understanding what it actually takes to deliver a project. And myself, I started off as a building cadet and then became a construction manager with a tier 1 contractor, moved into project management and then to expert work, the last bit being quite unintentionally. It was an accident, in other words. Now it's much more commonplace for, young engineers or quantity surveyors to join an expert services firm straight out of university or after a few years in industry. And most will also go on to study an LLM or other legal qualification, which was once quite rare. But I think it's important to have, that good academic foundation. Civil engineer, architect you see less so these days. I think an LLM is helpful. I started my career in Australia. Everything was very court driven. Dispute resolution in Australia has changed enormously over the last 20 years with the introduction of statutory adjudication starting in New South Wales from 1999 through to mediation, arbitration, expert determination, the introduction of dispute boards. I'm actually seeing over here in the Middle East, because I'm based in Dubai, particularly with a lot of the PIF projects in Saudi Arabia, they're taking a very similar pathway to what Australia's taken over the last 20 years through the introduction of multi-tiered dispute resolution clauses, through expert determination, DABs to arbitration and so on. So I do think in this very, very varied world we live in that an LLM is actually very, very helpful now in a way that possibly wasn't, 10 or so years ago. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way to build a career as an expert, but I would say that in my own experience, that 12 or so years that I spent on site has definitely been formative in how I approach each matter that I'm instructed on. My analysis style is more construction methodology driven than necessarily, delay analysis methodology driven. Which I think, may be part of the reason why I get instructed on the types of matters I do, which are very engineering led. So, I think it's really about taking every opportunity that's made available to you in your career. And as Chaitanya said, not everybody will become an expert. Not everybody may want to become an expert. And that's okay. But, for me, it's been an amazing career and it's taken me all over the world. I wouldn't change a thing.
So, Karen, since you started your career in Australia, then you now have a dual practice also in Dubai. I'm curious to know, when you move into a new market like Dubai, are there any difficulties or barriers that you've encountered early on?
No. There's no licensing or regulatory requirements in relation to arbitration cases, which influence how experts are engaged or work. Over here, court work is very different. Experts have to be registered with the courts. They're often appointed by the courts as well as party appointments. Because the courts are conducted in Arabic, you must be fluent in Arabic, both oral and written, which I'm not. So there's no court work for me here. But in terms of arbitration proceedings, no. There's really no barriers. I think the biggest hurdle for any expert, moving into a new jurisdiction is being able to build that network and to build the trust that will help you get your first appointment.
Well, it's very encouraging to hear that arbitration is very international and people from different jurisdiction can get into another jurisdiction relatively easier. So if they have the right expertise or preparation, the market seems open to all. So, but I imagine even though there's an open market, there are still some factors that may affect your ability to get instructed, or they may differ between disciplines. So, Karen, you just mentioned being knowing the industry, knowing the people in the jurisdiction. How about Victor? What is your experience? So, what is like in Australia?
So I think, largely I agree with Karen. I think there's some obvious barriers like language, where if something's required that you can't speak, that will obviously present a barrier. There's nuances in certainly how projects are delivered. There's nuances in the conduct of an arbitration in different regions, even if they're following, even if they're conducted under the same rules. If there's practitioners from different countries and tribunals from different legal backgrounds, there'll be nuances there. There's differences between practitioners with a common law and civil law background. And also from the perspective particularly of quantum evidence, you certainly need to be aware that certain types of claims, certain types of analyses have different standing in different jurisdictions. So you need to be aware of that going in. Having said all of that, those are all things that one can take account of, and one gains experience practicing across multiple jurisdictions. None of that, I think, is a barrier to engagement, although certainly, the barrier to engagement is your own presence in the market. If you don't know people in the market and they don't know you and you lack experience there, then that will probably hinder your ability to get an appointment. But really, that's a separate issue. That's an issue of networking and profile building.
How about for the business valuation for forensic accounting experts? For Lydia, you work in Asia a lot, so is knowing another Asian language important? For example, is Chinese important to your daily practice?
I would say the language ability is important. I think in Hong Kong market, given quite a lot of disputes involve Chinese entities, but it doesn't really mean that if you don't really know Chinese, then there is not much work for you, because I think Hong Kong is a very international arbitrations hub. So that's why we are also handling quite a lot of other disputes that doesn't really involve Chinese entities. But I think the most important thing is that for the local knowledge, I think the technical methodology that we use in valuation damages are basically generally the same internationally. So wherever that you are, using a discounted cash flow, a market multiples, but basically they're the same, regardless of whether the arbitration is. But I think what does actually matter, in addition to the language capability, is that the understanding of the commercial and factual context in which those methodology applied. Like what I said in Hong Kong, because a lot of arbitration involves Chinese entities and business in mainland China. So in those cases, an expert would need to understand not only the financial information, but also how relevant the industry operates, and the local business environment, and also the market dynamics and commercial practices in China and also the wider region. Using a very recent example, I work on a valuation dispute involving a mainland Chinese business. The valuation methodology itself is relatively straightforward, but one of the key issues was whether the management's projection is reasonable or not. And to assess those projections properly, it is very important to understand the competitive landscape, regulatory developments, and also the environment and market condition of that certain industry in China at the relevant time. So I think an expert, if you are unfamiliar with that sort of operating environment, could reach actually very different conclusion despite actually we are applying the same valuation framework. So I think that's the most important part, as having the local knowledge of the local market, and also in particular also network is also very important as well.
How about Chaitanya? I would be very interested to hear your perspectives as well.
I think the short answer is there are no regulatory and sort of licensing requirements to the work both Lydia and I do. So I think from that point of view, there are no restrictions. But I think the main restriction comes from the building of trust, right? A lot of the things that were mentioned by the various speakers relate to the text, right? I mean, we all know how to value businesses, and we all have understood that through education and practice, right? But I think where sometimes experts who are not familiar with the lay of the land miss out is the context. And I think that separates the ability of those who do generate engagements in a particular market versus those who struggle to do that. I mean, it's not that the regulations will prevent you from being appointed, but it's more that those who actually consume our services, our clients, would certainly ask the question, why someone new when they have a choice of those who have been tried and tested and have a track record in that market, right? And that's not a small hurdle to clear, because it's very commonly said that you don't fix something that's not broken. And of course, if it is broken and there is a shortage of a certain expertise in the market, no doubt you'll go outside your market and look for assistance in that space because it's not available to you in that particular market. But I think it's important to then take the time to build relationships in the market so that the trust can be factored. And once you have that, I think work follows.
That is very interesting and insightful, Chaitanya. Thank you very much. So we've covered a great deal of ground today, from the qualifications, regulatory considerations, practical realities of entering a new market, and other factors influencing appointments, also differences between discipline as well. So I would like to ask each of our panelists to give some practical advice or one piece of advice to those in the audience who are beginning at the beginning of their careers, thinking of being an expert in the future, or just simply looking to accelerate their career. So what is the most important part? Would you ask them to focus on developing your skills, your knowledge, or focus on a niche area probably? Or networking is something that a young professional should spend time on as well? Maybe we'll start with Victor.
Yes, lots of all those things are good. I think. I think the key is there's a balance. Obviously, you need to develop your technical skills. That itself won't be sufficient. You need to build your network. That itself also won't be sufficient. So I think you really do need to be reflective at any given moment and try to think about where you're strong or where you're ahead of where you want to be, and then focus on the areas where you're maybe behind where you want to be. I think a key thing that probably I took a long time to learn, that others learn faster, is I think it's important to be around people that are invested in your success. And that means lots of different things. It means if you're working for an expert, your ability to develop under an expert that's invested in your success and gives you opportunities and makes you client facing, etc., will be very different compared with working for an expert that doesn't give you those opportunities. It also means, networking with your with your peers in the industry, be that at law firms or other consulting firms, because you'll all be growing into the roles together, and those relationships are really important. And those are the people that will be happy to see you be successful as well. And when you do networking things like panels or publications or anything like that, really leverage them for relationships. And I'll just give a quick example and let other people speak, but panels are a really useful thing for someone that's wanting to grow into being an expert to do. But one of the main benefits is getting to know your other panelists and the time you spend with them in preparing. And that's where you build the stronger relationships than simply the people that are attending a panel. And the same thing goes for other sorts of initiatives and industry groups that you might get involved in.
So, Chaitanya, how about you? How do you, I'm very curious to know, for a young professional, it may be difficult for them to build that visibility and credibility with probably counsel and clients. So I'm interested in knowing your view, how to kickstart that process.
I don't think there's a secret sauce, to be honest, right? I mean, I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all approach that I could talk to and say this is what would work for most people. I think it depends on an individual's approach to relationship building. I think there should be a distinction between making connections versus making relationships. And I think the latter is what brings visibility and a long-term career in a profession. It could be anything. These days, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of fora that provide younger professionals to interact, network, and build relationships because, for example, in Singapore, the latest sort of trend is towards sports-based interaction. A lot of consulting firms and younger folks are engaging over a game of paddle, or perhaps have moved away from the more traditional approach to drinking and dining and all of that to active lifestyle-based networking. And I think that's quite useful, right? I mean, what better approach to leaving an impression on a lawyer than beating them on a tennis court in a match, right? They will always remember you if they have lost. So I think it just depends on an individual's approach. Having said that, right, this kind of a highly engaging networking approach can be limiting as well, because how many matches of tennis would you play in a week, right? It depends on an individual's outlook and their willingness to invest in their own professional network development.
Thank you. That's really good advice. It makes networking more fun as well if you participate in sports events.
And less injurious to health, I think. If you're not drinking, then you're doing something less injurious to your health.
Yes, it makes the process more enjoyable, and also it's easier to build rapport with somebody you don't know, probably. So how about Lydia? What's your view? So according to your experience, how do you build this network to accelerate your career?
Yeah, I mean, like Victor and Chaitanya give all those different good advices. I nearly don't really know what I can say, but I think building trust with the client is not like, in a way that there is networking part that you get to know people, but then after you know them, how to build the trust with them is the most important part. And the trust cannot be built only by one day or one piece of work or one analysis, and it is built over time through like consistently like developing high quality work. So I think as a tips to the juniors, I think it's still like it is very important to know your work, do the technical like foundation well, and developing good judgment as well. Because I think judgment always comes from like being curious, asking questions, understanding the commercial context, and learning from the experience. And by continuously delivering good work to your client, then trust can be built throughout those relationships with them.
That's really good advice. Karen, how about for you? So when you move to Dubai, is it very important to be local in the jurisdiction? Do you get to meet the people in the jurisdiction?
Yes. When you're hopping jurisdictions, being present in that jurisdiction is definitely important. In terms of building your career, I think the advice I would give to young practitioners first is be useful. Try and be useful. And also, your boss isn't just your boss. Treat him like your customer, treat him like your client, because they are the people who will determine what matters you get put on, what kind of work you will get. And it goes to the point that Victor was making about working with an expert or a manager who wants to invest in you. It's a two-way street. So be useful. Do everything you possibly can to be helpful. Offer to take the minutes, because that gets you in the room. It gets you a seat at the table. It puts you in the middle of the action. So my advice to young people starting out, regardless of your career, try and be as useful as you possibly can. And don't treat your manager or the expert or whoever you happen to be reporting to on whatever assignment as your boss. Treat them like they're your client, because they will control what you get access to in the future. They're really important. In terms of expanding your career into new jurisdictions, if you work with one of the larger international expert firms, so, Victor works with HKA, Chaitanya with Secretariat, who, constantly dueling it out for who's number one. It could be a case of reaching out to one of, the leading experts in a different office and offering to work on there, or getting in touch with your BD person. Even, investigating a transfer to another office and, taking on the expat life. There's lots of things you can do. Alternatively, if you're like me and you decide to, go and do it on your own, and, I've been doing this for a long time, so, it's easier to do it on your own. Having a great relationship with your instructing lawyers will help you leverage those relationships with their colleagues in other offices into the future. So I think it all really comes down to, the basic premise of be useful, try and be helpful. Treat every person you come across, whether they're internal or external, as if they're your client. Because because it's probably, when you're younger, the people that you work with internally that will have more influence over how your career progresses than necessarily your external client.
Thank you. Those are all really immensely helpful insights for young professionals trying to develop their career. So, and I also imagine that our audience is already reflecting on how they may apply those advice in their next step in their career. So I'm aware of the time, so it's time for us to wrap up today. Thank you to our panelists for sharing such great insights to their career. It's really invaluable. So I would also like to thank you to the audience for joining episode 2 of Cleared for Takeoff. So those who have registered will receive a feedback survey shortly after this webinar. So, and we look forward to receiving your feedback and suggestions on how we can improve, and also what topics you may be interested in for us to organize future events. And sorry about the technical issues at the beginning of the webinar. And before we go, and I'm excited to invite you all to episode 3 of our series, where we have invited representatives from arbitral institutions, and they will share about career opportunities and pathways across the region. So episode 3 will be held on the 7th of September. So registration will be available soon, so keep an eye out and register, and we'd love to see you there. So have a nice day, everybody, and thank you again. And thank you, Victor, Chaitanya, Lydia, and Karen. Thank you.